Okay. It's 7:30, and I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Riverwoods. Would you please stand with me and say the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. First order of business, roll call, please.
Mayor Ford.
Present.
Trustee Clayton.
Here.
Trustee Dickon.
Here.
Trustee Eastman.
Here.
Trustee Hollander.
Here.
Trustee Jamerson.
Here.
And Trustee Smith.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. First order of business is the approval of minutes of the Board of Trustees meeting of September 3rd, 2024. Do I have a motion for approval, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any questions, comments, additions, deletions? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Moving on to the Finance Director's report, we'll start with the approval of the bills. Do I have a motion for approval of the bills, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any questions? Trustee Clayton, please.
There's a bill under Gewalt Hamilton that I wanted to ask, but I need a minute to try to find the note as to where it is. So,
Oh, okay.
Sarah.
Is there anyone else who has a question on our bills in the meantime?
Okay, never mind. I'll pass. Thanks.
Oh, okay. If there's no other questions, seeing none, could I have a roll call, please?
Sure. Trustee Dickon.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Trustee Smith.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Motion passes.
You did? Yeah.
Well, you only get one vote. We're only going to
I need
record
to
one
vote.
vote.
Yes, but you
Oh.
missed Trustee Eastman.
I think you missed. Yeah, I think you missed by.
So how do you feel? Okay. Are we all good now? We're all good. Okay. Finance Director's report. Director Vasquez, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few items for tonight's report. First, the board recently gave staff direction to seek a sound engineer to look into the sound quality of this room and possible solutions to make it easier for everyone to hear during meetings. We did receive the name of several firms, so I appreciate people reaching out on that. Our staff and the village attorney were able to arrange a meeting with the architect for the building, Mr. Bob Hammer. Mr. Hammer has had good experience working with a sound engineer consultant on various projects from Soundscape Engineering, and he has put us into contact with that firm. This consultant has provided the village with a quote for a fee of $4,200 to document the existing room conditions and measure sound reverberation, establish targets for sound reverberation time, and perform calculations to determine interior finishes to help achieve the sound reverberation targets. Their report will include sketches, markups, and product information for any recommended solutions. While this contract would be under the $5,000 limit to bring before the board, I wanted to provide you all with an update before we move forward with the next steps. Mayor Ford and I recently met with the outreach director for State Representative Bob Morgan's office, Dominic Brenakowski. We discussed upcoming projects and needs the village has to see if there were potential funding sources that we should be seeking. Dominic is following up with us after reaching out to his contacts at various state agencies that may have information on grant money available. And then finally, budget work continues in high gear leading up to our finance workshop on October 15th. I've been working with the other directors and our consultants to try and have clear numbers for our upcoming discussions. And that's it for my report.
Are there any questions? With respect to the acoustic, I assume that the board would like us to move forward with this. Again, we presented it to you just as a follow-up
Yes.
and
Yes.
awareness. It is under the spending limit. Okay, fine. We will move forward.
Sounds great.
All right. Moving on, Treasurer's Report. Our Treasurer is not with us this evening. Director of Community Services Report. Director Witt, please.
Thank you, Mayor. It's really only two things with regard to road improvements. The first being that the sewer lining project is complete, and we're just going through paperwork to close out that project. The second item related to road work deals with the Saunders Road STP project for the Phase 3 construction engineering, which I will cover when we get into the new business section.
Are there any questions? Yes,
I have a question.
Trustee Jamerson, please.
Thank you. The Saunders Road Lake County work that they were doing, is that complete?
No, not at this time, it's not.
Because I had a resident buttonhole me on Sunday regarding all of the equipment that's at the corner of Saunders and Deerfield Road, and it seems to have been there forever. And it has not moved. And I'm wondering if the contractor is just storing it there because he has no place else to put it, or are they going to be using that in the future?
I don't have an answer on that. As of about 3 weeks ago, they were still doing the final connection across the street. But it is a valid question to understand, what that intent is and when the rest of the work that is going to be south of Deerfield Road is actually going to go into full steam, because they have the extension that they're going to do on the west side of the street. I don't have a schedule for that, but I will provide something at the next meeting.
That would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, are there any other questions for our director? Okay, moving on, consultants report. The attorney, please.
The Lake County Board approved the intergovernmental agreement with the Village of Riverwoods at their board meeting on September 10th. I don't have the executed ordinance, but I saw it was on the agenda. I was told it was approved, and I understand that they're gathering signatures on the agreement. That was really the major impediment for the village to go forward with this, is knowing that we had an agreement with Lake County, which includes various details that we discussed in the past and their financial support of the detention and all the work going on the site. Our due diligence is up tomorrow. I believe the Fire District Board is going to be meeting to review a revised site plan and tell us probably before 5 p.m. tomorrow that they're okay, in which case we'll be obligated to deposit some additional earnest money with Federal Life and continue to proceed to closing on October 15. I don't know, Director Wood didn't mention that we've had a couple of coordination meetings with WB Olson on the demolition. So, as we proceed to closing, we'll also be coordinating these other activities. I don't know, Steve, if there's anything to mention about that.
Nothing really special. We had a walkthrough of the building with WB Olson last week. They are looking to prepare a bid package for securing a demolition contractor to look at the building itself and any site work that needs to be taken down, like the cooling towers. But we need a little more coordination with the fire district's architect with regard to where the demolition project stops and they take over. So we're in the process of getting those meetings together.
That's all I have.
Are there any questions? Trustee Jamerson, please.
Thank you. I noticed later on in the agenda, we're going to talk about a change order for the environmental consultant that did some testing, and they did a lot of testing. Did they find anything that we can talk about?
We can talk.
If we're okay to talk, then let's talk. All right, so you're going to steal a lot of the thunder for when we get to this, but that's okay.
You can save it till later.
I'm sorry?
I didn't mean to. You can save it till later. I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
Well, we could cover it at that time because it's
That's
all
fine.
part. It's all part of the reasoning behind the change order.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Moving along, Plan Commission report, please. Chair Brightcroft.
Good evening. The village asked the planning commission for a special meeting on September the 26th to discuss the plan of subdivision for the Federal Life property. So right now I'm trying to see if we have a quorum of 4 people so we can have the meeting next week. Right now we have 3 people available and hopefully we'll get at least 1 more and can do the meeting. If the planning commission meets on 9/26, I'd like to request that we not have the October 3rd meeting since it's the following week. And I don't know if we're going to have anything in addition, but if we need to meet twice, we will. Any questions?
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you very much. Zoning Board of Appeals report, Chair Graditor.
This does get very tiresome, folks. I have nothing to report.
I suppose we should ask why, but
Yeah, if you wanted to know why, we have an applicant who has canceled pretty much at the last minute, the last 4 months. The meeting that we were supposed to have him at last Thursday, I believe he emailed the village at 3:30 or 3:45 in the afternoon that day to say that we should just do it without him. And I said, we're not going to do it unless there's an applicant in case anyone has a question to ask. So we've put it off until the next meeting and hopefully he will show. Until then, I have nothing to report.
are there any questions for our chair? Thank you very much. Next item of business, police report, Chief.
The police activity is in the board packets. Of note in the activity, we did have 1 burglary, and it was a commercial burglary at Extra Space Storage along Milwaukee. We did interrupt a burglary there on the morning of the 12th. As the officers were pulling in, they ran out into the woods. We weren't able to catch them. We believe they got into a waiting vehicle after they ran through the woods. They didn't get away with, we don't believe they got away with anything. We're still waiting for a list of what might have been taken, but we did recover several things that they left behind. We don't think they ran off carrying anything. So they broke into a few of the garage doors there. And then this last spring, we weren't able to deploy our speed radar sign that we've been using for several years because it no longer works. It's on Palm Pilot technology, for those of you who remember Palm Pilots. So we got our money's worth out of it. I did apply at that point for a grant through, it's the Powering Safe Communities grant from ComEd and the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus. I did identify a sign for $4,400, and after getting a few quotes, and we last week we were awarded the grant for over $2,200, so it'll cover half of the cost of the sign. So we've ordered the sign, and then we'll get reimbursed for half the cost of the sign once I submit the paperwork for the approved grant. And that's all I have.
Are there any questions for our chief? Trustee Smith, please.
Chief Dano, the question I had is the radar speed camera, is it just telling you what the speed of the car is, or is there ticketing that goes along with it? How does that work?
No, we don't do anything with tickets. What it does is it'll let motorists know what their speeds are, and it'll flash if they go over the threshold that we set. It also keeps data for us, so we can, when somebody complains about speeding in a subdivision, we can look and see if there actually are speeders going through the subdivision, or we report back to the complainant usually what the reported speeds are that we're finding.
And then, so I'm sorry, as a follow-up question, Chief Dano, and I appreciate the answer, is that then portable so you can move it from like neighborhood to neighborhood, street to street? So if there is a neighborhood that's experiencing or believes they're experiencing higher speed traffic than there should be?
That's exactly correct. We screw it onto existing speed limit signs. And we've used it quite a bit in the past, especially when we get complaints in certain areas. And we used to use it on port wine all the time, but we just haven't had it, and I didn't want to go buy it until we got the grant.
Sure. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Trustee Dickon, please.
There's something in the news this afternoon, and the subject line was no known threat to DHS from students' social media behavior. So all parents in District 113 received a very vague email from the school stating that there was a student who had some suspicious activity. But it's alarming when you receive that and when something shows up in the news. And it was very vague. And the news article was very vague. So I'm curious as to whether or not you might have any more detail that you could share as to what actually caused such alert.
I don't have any details, but now that you just told me about it, I'm going to look into it.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for our chief? Trustee Eastman, please.
I was just going to raise, since we're talking about the sign and we mentioned port wine, I have noticed in recent months much larger incidents of people speeding on port wine. And I guess I live on Sherry, which is right off of port wine. And I used to notice more frequently, particularly in the evenings, like traffic stops and people getting ticketed. I haven't noticed as much of that activity recently. What's kind of the plan? I mean, obviously, port wine's really hard to deal with at times, but I've just noticed, having been there for a decade, that it seems to be that people are speeding more and more.
Well, we stop more cars on port wine than any other street in town. So that's where most of our activity is. We did recently, about a month ago, have a directed patrol there due to a couple of, or at least one complaint from a neighbor. So we did a directed patrol, and that might have been all the activity you were seeing, where the officers are documenting the stops they make and what enforcement action that they take. And then after I get the results of the directed patrol, I usually let the complainant know about it. And so we did make several stops about a month ago. So it's probably died down since the patrol expired, but I know for a fact that we're still making stops on port wine. I mean, I hear the officers making stops.
Okay. That's good. I appreciate that, just because I've noticed anecdotally, it just seems like when I run frequently there, I've noticed people going at very high speeds at certain times, well over the speed limit. So thanks for your attention to that.
Well, if you want to maybe shoot me an email with the times that you're noticing it, sure. I can put out another directed patrol for those times.
That'd be great.
Any other comments? Questions for our chief? Thank you. Thank you for everything. Next item on the agenda is the fire district report.
I can't follow that act, but nothing really significant to report other than just a better life problem, but the experts will take over.
Thank you. We do have the Federal Life, speaking of Federal Life, we do have training availability in that building for our police department and our fire department prior to demolition, just an update. Okay, information and comments from the president. I attended an Orphans of the Storm event over the weekend. And one of the things that I talked about with one of our residents who works at Orphans Northern. And they noticed that there aren't very many residents, the Riverwoods residents who volunteer there. And so we're going to put something in the newsletter and see if we can't get more people involved at Orphans. So I thought I would just mention that. Next on my list is the South Lake Mosquito Abatement District, which I think you all know is my favorite. And the latest meeting, they're rolling forward, but that is due, I think, in my opinion, due to the efforts of two of our residents, Laura Trevino and Rich Kumjian, who are our representatives on that board as part of the Decennial Committee. And the Decennial Committee is engaged every 10 years. Laura Trevino also works with our fire district on their decennial report. So that decennial report sets forward what the board is supposed to do, does do, what its plans are, and how it attempts to go about things. The other topic on the South Lake Mosquito Abatement Board, we took up with Representative Morgan's office, and that is to look at the state law that talks about setting the membership of the board. Right now, Riverwoods does not have a seat at the board. It is a taxing body, but the appointment of members to the board is wholly within the prerogative of the chair of the county board. So there's nothing going on that, shouldn't be going on. It's all very legal and straight up. It's just, I think we need a little bit of a change there. So we'll see what we can do on that round. So other than that, I think what we do have tonight is a change in the agenda. The change in the agenda puts the visitors wishing to address the board before our new business and old business. So I thought if there are any visitors here wishing to address the board at this point, please come forward. Oh, other than on agenda items. Do you have something on an agenda item? Sit down.
I'm just your visitor. Randy Merrill, Riverwoods Preservation Council. Wait, let me see. 8 inches. Do you remember that? Okay.
8 straight, great.
8 straight,
Great.
great. Okay. We had a very successful native plant sale this weekend. Weather was beautiful, and there was a big rush in the beginning, and we were able to sell out just about everything that we had, and things still out of the directors absorbing some of the overstock. And I think, Trustee Jamerson, didn't you actually have to deliver something for us?
Yes, I delivered a whole truckload of trees and bushes to a Lincolnshire resident.
Well, we thank you.
Did you get a tip?
I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And no, I didn't get a tip. Although she has a very large area in the backyard that she took all the buckthorn out of, and she took me in the backyard to show me so that you guys would know that she was telling the truth.
Okay, well, that's good. It's funny how we did have a lot of residents from other parts of the communities. We have Lincolnshire, we had a couple Northbrook people. So, and then again, as a reminder, on Saturday, October 5th, we're having our recycle event. And I noticed in the minutes, it might have been a little confusing. We are not going to have shredding because Vernon Township is doing an event maybe now. Did I miss it? Maybe I forgot. So it's I draw a blank, but we don't need the redundancy nor the expense. So that's all I have.
Are there any questions for Ms. Merrill? Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else wishing to address the board of items not on the agenda?
David Ritter for Vernon Trail. I'm not sure if this is, I should make these comments now or for new business, but I wanted to just make a couple of comments about the Lincolnshire sign that's been up for about a year in front of Vernon Trail, right in front of our street. We hate it. It's an eyesore. There's so many signs there now. We had no notice that it was going up. I'm not sure they coordinated with our village about it. We've had some communications with Lincolnshire about, is there anything we could do about it? We've heard different things that, like we have a Vernon Trail sign there. We've heard that they would move it. Now they're saying they won't. I'd love to know where the boundary is. You know, we would like to explore some plantings of our own to soften what that looks like. I don't know how to go about getting that plat, you know, that sort of thing. So any help that maybe Bruce, you could get that to me so we could at least see where we would be within our rights, because we've been told that even our Vernon Trail sign that we put up decades ago is apparently on Lincolnshire property, which we were unaware of. So, you know.
Okay, we can look into that. We'll take a look at the plats and so forth, and we can get back to you on that.
I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else wishing to address the board? Yes, ma'am. What the trustees did receive was an email regarding a resident's wish to petition the board for a change to the ordinance regarding burning. So that will be something that when we receive that petition, when the clerk receives that petition, we will get back to the board on it and put that as an item to discuss. And, all right. There's anyone else, items not on the board, not on the agenda, rather? Okay, moving forward, new business. First item of new business is a presentation on the proposed residential plan development ordinance. And we have our village planners with us this evening, Lee Brown and Michael Blue. So I think we will ask you to lead us through the discussion.
I'm Brown, he's Blue. Just
okay, I didn't even think about that. You know that, right?
Better than black.
I didn't, totally.
We're going to try to take a high-level discussion of this rather than get deeply into the draft, recognizing that this is intended to be your opportunity to get a sense of what this intends to be and whether or not you think it's generally ripe for a public hearing to discuss potential adoption. So if you could. Definition. The primary goal of the residential plan development is to preserve and maintain the character of Riverwoods as a woodlands community. A primary purpose of the RPD is to encourage and allow more creative and imaginative design for land developments than is possible under the conventional district zoning regulations, including residences at densities greater than the 1 dwelling per acre, while enhancing sustainability and excellence in design and construction. Which is to say, we have a conventional zoning ordinance. There are some properties within the village that, given the restrictions of a conventional zoning ordinance, we will not see the best possible, most creative, most attractive, most likely to be compatible with the rest of the community development. We had recent example of the fact that in the federal life properties, there were limitations of what the village could impose or require or encourage, where a planned development ordinance allows for greater flexibility to make sense of how do you get that same density in that property and get the best character out of the development itself. So it's a tool you don't currently have, and yet we're trying to establish is what would that tool look like. This is a common tool in municipalities. You're somewhat rare in not having it as part of your existing ordinance.
Remember to look straight, 8 inches, and you'll sound great, please.
I will do
Thank you. Russ Romanelli isn't here tonight, so we've really got to, pick up the slack.
How is the RPD different from a conventional zoning district? The residential plan development can allow for modifications from the rigid standards of lot sizes, setbacks, and densities, where doing such would result in better design and greater protection of the natural environment than conventional zoning. RPDs are proposed to be special uses, meaning that they are not permitted by right. They must go through a special use development approval process and require a greater level of scrutiny of design by the village than development under conventional zoning. An RPD combines both zoning and subdivision. It is not taking an existing subdivision and changing the standards within the lot. It's an overall plan that is put together for the development prior to subdivision. Where would it be used? It's not intended and would not be used as a substitute for zoning and subdivision within the existing single-family neighborhoods in the village. It's intended to be used on larger, more exceptional properties where protecting woodlands, wetlands, or other natural features is more difficult without a master plan for the site. The Plan Commission recommended a minimum of 25 acres for any application of them. This would be something I expect that you would discuss. The primary features of this RPD, we're suggesting that we would have 2 thresholds. The first of which is a minimum set of design standards that would be over and above what you have under conventional zoning. The second threshold is an even higher level of design in which, if it was presented, it would make the eligible modifications from the underlying standards. So first level is better than what you've got, and the second level is, if you do even better than that, we allow for modifications from the underlying standards. It requires a site master plan, which is to say, this is going to tell us much more about the development than just simply the zoning district is X. And again, it's a two-cycle process, which is to say, there's a preliminary process that goes through both the Plan Commission and the Village Board, and then sometime later, when the greater level of detail is provided, a second level of approval, and that's a final development plan that goes through, again, both the Plan Commission and the Village Board. So again, two levels of standards. The first level is just simply eligibility. It would require site design excellence, preservation of usable open space, efficiency of the site circulation and ingress and egress, sustainable landscaping, compatibility of the building forms with the surrounding properties, attractive building materials, and well-managed stormwater. Then there's this extra level. Lagniappe is not just a French misinterpretation of the Spanish term to mean a little extra. So we have under A through K a series of suggested things that would be extra over and above what would be allowed under the RPD itself. So if a developer brings to you improvements, dedications, and amenities that wouldn't have otherwise been required, but these are over and above, they might be eligible for increases or decreases of setbacks, et cetera. Adaptive reuse of existing structures, sustainability of design, alternative energy sources on site, green roofs, rain gardens, food forests, a whole series of standards that the Plan Commission said, how do we get even better than just good design? And so we have these listed as essentially the carrots that would attract a better level of design and bring something extra to the community. What we're asking for again is, do you think that this is a worthy project or process? And if such, if you have comments and suggestions about either additional standards or something that you'd like for us to clarify, that would be great. Ultimately, we're looking for the Village Board to say, there will be a time that you should take this to the public in a public hearing so that it could be reviewed before adoption coming back to you.
If I can.
Yes.
I just want to add to that. Thank you, Lee. When we worked on earlier drafts of this proposed ordinance, we were thinking of the exceptional large properties, one of which at the time was Federal Life, that has found another use at the moment. But Wolters Kluwer is clearly another site. And the concepts in this ordinance could apply to larger areas in the village that are, for example, I don't want to really encourage anyone to look at this, but there are other areas in the village that have significant amount of open space. So this one day could be a tool that we would need for that. But I think that the urgency of this for the board to think about is that we know that the Wolters Kluwer property is on the market. The broker for the owner has been in contact with us over the last year a number of times. They've shared information with us about the types of developers that are approaching the owner. They're listening to the village about what it is that the village is looking for. We shouldn't probably lose sight of the fact that we didn't have all the tools we needed when there was a proposal on the Federal Life property, we want to have the tools that we need when we start receiving proposals for what is almost a 50-acre property. The ownership of the Wolters Clear property has met with us. They've told us clearly that they are interested in selling the property. It doesn't meet their needs anymore. It's approximately 199,000 square feet of office space. And I don't know what their daily population is, but it's a fraction of what it had been years ago. So normally, you think of ordinances as something that has general applicability throughout the village. This ordinance would, but it can be confined by where we elect to make it a special use. So if we make it a special use in the Office and Research 1 district, that's where it would apply until this board elects to make it a special use in another district. And that's a way of saying it can have general applicability, but it also can serve a very specific need that we see coming in the future. So those are some of the things that I wanted the board to understand as to why we've been working so hard to have this ready, to have, when the broker has asked us what is the village looking for, we have been taking the charrettes that the Planning Commission has been looking at. We've been taking the list of desirable characteristics, the list of undesirable characteristics, and sharing them, saying, we're working on an ordinance, but these are the kinds of characteristics that are going to be brought into the ordinance. So tell any developer who's looking, this is the level of excellence we're looking for. If we had the ordinance, we would share the ordinance as well. We don't have it yet, but that is that's probably not far on the horizon given what we're hearing.
Are there any, Trustee Hollander, please?
Would this apply to future properties that the village might annex, or would that process be independent of this?
This would not automatically apply to a property that we annexed, but it could always be used as special use in other districts. So once you have the process and the methodology and the standards, it's just a question of changing the particular regulations of a particular zoning district, a limited industrial district or another, an R5 district, some other district, and saying this district can also have this special use. So it's an easy thing to, many villages will have a table and they'll say, these are the places, these are the zoning districts in which this special use is allowed. And you'll see, an S for special use, and it'll be allowed in the R4 and the R5 and the Office and Research. It'll list all the districts in which this is a special use. And so initially in our village, this would become a special use in the ONR1 district, but there's nothing to prevent a future board from saying, we want this to be a potential special use in another district. And that could be the subject of a negotiation of an annexation agreement. It could be something the board just decides is appropriate given a changing land use and trends and economics.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Trustee Smith, please.
So Bruce, if we were to make the Wolters Kluwer, the OR1 zone, PRD eligible or required, whatever the right word is there, would that prohibit a different company going in and using the office space? So is that kind of in perpetuity then? So it's only for PRD, or how does that process work?
No, so the current zoning of the site would remain Office and Research 1. There's a list of permitted uses, which includes the current corporate office uses. This would just become a potential special use in that district that's not currently available. It doesn't mean the property has to be developed in that way. In fact, it would be incumbent on the owner or the applicant to request that the property be allowed to be used as a special use. Otherwise, only the permitted uses are available.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Trustee Clayton?
Just so I understand the process at this point, you're looking for us to review the information that we have and get back to someone with questions and comments and so on? Is that the plan?
I think that would be useful we talked internally about.
What we were talking about is because this is such an important change, and it is important that we discuss it. maybe at too much length, but it's important that we discuss it and all the features that are contained herein. So one of the suggestions is to have either to have a special meeting or to have a workshop. Take some time before a meeting to focus solely on this RPD and all of the features and facets that would be included or that would touch this RPD. And because it's so lengthy and there are so many components to it, it would seem to me that we couldn't ask you to do anything more tonight than say, yes, let's continue, and maybe agree on whether that means taking an hour before a board meeting to just kind of workshop the idea a little bit, or to have a special meeting dedicated entirely to this. So I'm kind of looking to the board to see what, Trustee Jamerson, please.
So if we have questions or comments, I think Trustee Clayton's question was, if we have questions and or comments, is there someone we can send them to before we meet as a group?
Sure.
Who
I think I think he raised his hand. Please send them to.
You know what? Don't go to any auctions, Steve.
Yes, I mean, if you have questions or comments, I think that's the appropriate place to send them. Because Trustee Witt was at all the plan commission meetings and so forth, and would collect those. And we could then discuss all those, like I said, all those features and facets.
If we find that from the comments, we're able to say put together a brief red line and say we really didn't have that many material, major comments, we were able to absorb them. Maybe that would simplify matters. If we get the comments and say this needs a lot of discussion, we probably would come back and say.
That was kind of where I was going. It may be that a number of comments about a specific provision with this would signal the fact that that's an agenda item for when we have our special
Our get together, whatever that
of
is.
one kind or another.
Yeah.
And it also might shorten that in the sense that if there are questions that just require clarification, we can clear those up ahead of the meeting rather than going through them during the meeting.
Yeah. Would the board choose a workshop an hour before a meeting? Okay. Getting some heavy nods here. Okay. You do know that you must recall that we do have a workshop coming up, a finance workshop on October 15th. So we'll probably push this out a little bit then.
But not too long. Please.
Sorry, Chris. So the question would then become is, do we have any sense of timing on the Walters Kluwer? So do we need to kind of rush this ahead of the finance workshop, or I just want to make sure we're cognizant of.
No.
Okay.
There have been inquiries. Of late, there have been inquiries. That doesn't mean that those things don't typically go really fast. And they know that they would need to come to the board. They know that they would need to come to the village, particularly if it's a residential type of development. They need to come to the village. And so, no, I don't think there's a great sense of urgency. I don't want to see it trail off into January, but
I think November's a possibility.
I think November might be a good possibility. We've already changed the meeting date for the first one in November to that Wednesday. So, yes, sir. Trustee Clayton.
Just, I won't be here for that meeting, and I'd really appreciate it if we could do it at the second meeting in November.
Sure. Does anybody have any issues with? You will?
There for that first meeting in November.
So the second.
How about the second meeting in November?
I will be there for the second.
Okay.
I will be at the second meeting, but I'm having knee surgery at the end of October, and I may not be able to make the November meeting, the first meeting. So
The second meeting. works
Wow,
better
we
for
might
you.
not have a first meeting in November. I mean, I'm getting really excited here. Okay. All right, let's tentatively schedule a second meeting in November for a workshop ahead of the regularly scheduled meeting. We would hold the workshop in the conference room, and so we can sit around a table and, okay. And in the meantime, or ahead of that, we'll try to collect your comments and note other items that we might be talking about at that time. Make sense? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay. Moving on. Second item of new business, approval of a change order for environmental consulting services under a contract with Anderson Environmental Consulting, Inc. regarding asbestos sampling for the Federal Life property. Director Witt, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So Anderson Environmental Consulting has provided professional environmental health and safety consulting services related to performing asbestos sampling and a phase 1 environmental site assessment of the Federal Life property. The asbestos testing is done inside the building, and the site assessment looks for presence of hazardous materials on the site itself. Not to say that the testing for the site assessment would never come up with asbestos. It's generally looking for materials within the soils, mainly contamination that may occur over time from previous underground storage tanks that may have existed, may have been removed and never remediated, or tanks that might still be leaking at some point in time. Happy to say that the site assessment for the soils came back clean. The number of material samples that were taken was not determined at the time that the proposal was put together. However, during the review of the building itself, 140 samples were taken because you have to look at all different conditions within the building, and it's hard to determine prior to coming up with a full scope. There was a pre-approved unit price for that cost. And out of the 149 samples that were taken, 2 samples came back indicating the presence of asbestos, which I believe were located within the IT room. So that should not affect anything that the fire district or the police department are going to be looking for, because all we need to do at this point is close off that room so that people aren't in and out and not taking their cutoff saws and slicing things apart, Chief. We'll keep you away from that. So the proposal was originally written for $4,170 with an approved unit cost of $19 per sample. However, with the number of samples that they determined were necessary to do at the unit cost, the full contract amount came to $7,201, which was slightly over $3,000 change order. The work has been completed. Staff recommends that the village board would approve their invoice in the amount of $7,201 to be approved for payment.
Trustee Jamerson.
Sorry. Thank you. I have a quick question for Bruce Hoover. Do we bear the brunt of the cost to abate the asbestos, or is that, what's the contract say about that? Is there anything in there about that? If it's only 2 samples, it's probably going to be a minimal cost anyways. Was it floor tile?
It's not a cost the seller absorbs.
It's a what?
It's not a cost that the seller absorbs.
Okay, that was the question.
Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Is there a second, please? Second. Is there any further discussion on the change order? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Hollander. Trustee Jamerson. Trustee Smith.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Dickon.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Next order of business is approval of Thomas Engineering as the oversight engineer for Saunders Road Phase 3 engineering firm. Director Witt, please.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So this report actually gives a little bit of background as to the status of the project itself, but included with that, we're really concentrating on the Phase 3 portion, which is the construction end. So the improvement project for Saunders Road is moving into construction phase. The project will be on track for letting in January of 2025 through IDOT. But in advance of the construction work beginning, which is anticipated to start in April of 2025 and extend through project closeout in December of 2025. So it is close to 3/4 of a year project. So in advance of getting that work done, we have to select an engineering firm to monitor the construction activities of the contractor to verify that the work that they're putting in place meets the plans and specs and are in accordance with IDOT protocol and specifications. As we've discussed before, by following IDOT's quality-based selection process, or QBS, to select a consultant to provide these services, the village becomes eligible for an 80-20 split in cost sharing with IDOT for this portion of the work, i.e. IDOT paying 80% and the village picking up the remainder 20%. That QBS is a procedure that facilitates selection of a professional design firm based on their qualifications, not based on price. They look at not only their qualifications in previous projects, their competence, the background of people that are assigned to the project, their credentials, IDOT certifications, et cetera. So 4 engineering firms responded to the village's request for statements of qualifications for this critical assignment. Upon completion of the interview process and subsequent reference checks, Thomas Engineering Group was unanimously selected to be the consultant to provide construction engineering services. They have prepared the attached agreement on IDOT forms in the amount of $341,938, which is about 10.5% of the project cost. And that covers their cost of services throughout the duration of the project from April, even prior to April, all the way through closeout in December. And as part of that 80-20 split with IDOT, the village's exposure would be $68,387.60, which would be paid out fully within the 2025 budget. So are there any questions?
Are there any questions on the process, the assignment? I have a motion for approval, please.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any other questions, comments? Roll call, please.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Trustee Smith. Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Dickon.
Aye.
And Trustee Eastman.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next item of business is approval of a contract for public works maintenance services with SE Inc. Management LLC. And again, trustee, might as well be, Director Witt.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll have to apologize. We're going to have a slight change to what we're presenting tonight. We're not going to be moving forward with a recommendation for SE Inc. to provide snowplow services as a backup to our current contractor. So we're concentrating solely tonight on the village property maintenance work. So back on, it's a little bit of a sordid story. Back in May of 2024, the village board approved a contract to award a contract for those services to Calvo's Maintenance Services, Inc. At that point, they were going to provide general building maintenance and minor public works needs, as well as emergency tree removal for the village. In negotiating the contract, Calvo made it known they were not willing to secure the required workers' compensation insurance because the cost was more than they had anticipated. So they backed out of, we actually backed out of moving forward with the contract with them. However, recently, Sharetta Enterprises, Inc., who previously provided similar services to the village up to about 18 months ago, has expressed an interest in providing the services again to the village. I did an interview with the company and checked references on them, and they appear to remain to be a good fit for the services that the village needs. So we're looking for a recommendation that a contract be awarded to Sharetta Enterprises, subject to attorney approval, to perform the scope of work outlined in their attached proposal solely for the public works portion of their proposal.
Are there any questions? Any comments? Do I hear a motion for approval, please?
So moved.
Is there a second? Trustee Clayton, is that second? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, roll call, please.
Trustee Jefferson. Trustee Smith.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Dickon.
Aye.
Trustee Eastman.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander. Motion passes.
Okay, your next item of business is consideration of an amendment to the electrical aggregation contract with Nordic Energy. Attorney Hubert, please.
Okay, this is going to be the most riveting part of the evening.
Yeah.
So everybody, the company that supplies our electricity, signed a 2-year contract. We had a rate. There's a material adverse change clause in the contract, which they believe was triggered because an auction that normally occurred earlier in the year was delayed. By the time it occurred, they'd already signed the contract with us. And although it's only one component of the price, and in a normal year, maybe a modest change in it wouldn't really have affected their ability to honor their price to us. In this particular case, the resulting change in price was 10 times what had been the original rate. So therefore, under the clause that they invoke, they have the right to try to negotiate in good faith with the village an amendment to the contract, failing which they can terminate the contract. The village is not obligated to agree to anything. We can negotiate in good faith, but we're not obligated to agree to anything. Each decision we take has certain ramifications. If we don't reach agreement and the supplier terminates, everybody will be getting more notices and they'll be reverting back to ComEd. If we negotiate an increase, not as much as they've asked for, but we negotiate some increase, again, a series of notices go out to everyone, letting them know that there's been a change in the rate, which also gives them a right to opt out. Everyone still has the right to opt out. The course of action that would be the most advantageous to the village is if the supplier would honor the rate that they quoted to us for at least a period until, according to our consultant, until next May. And then we could all gracefully agree to terminate the contract then. So we would get the benefit of 1 year of the contract. Our consultant believes that the supplier is not being hurt that much until a lot of these new rates are triggered in June of next year. We've made that proposal to the supplier, and the supplier, remember I told you this was riveting, the supplier has declined that suggestion, at least for now. They say they can't afford to keep the rate the same until next May. So therefore, the ball is in the supplier's court. Right now, we have a contract, we have a rate. We've made some suggestions. They've not responded favorably to them. They've not made a counterproposal yet. So I think that they will simply stall for a while. I have no idea what they will do. If our consultant is correct that they may be okay until next May, they may not feel an urgency to resolve this with us right away. I don't know. Apparently, if they agree to terminate the contract early, they will incur charges as they have to break up or get out of the future purchases that they have locked in for us. They still have, I would call them breakup charges. So the supplier looks set to lose one way or another unless the village, for reasons unknown to me, would agree to the much higher rates. If the village doesn't agree and they terminate, the village would suffer the inconveniences of these notices going out, but also would have the opportunity to rebid. Our consultant thinks we would probably be able to go out for new bidding in January and try and secure new rates effective next May or June. So it's a long history. Nothing that we can do at the moment, but that's where we stand.
Are there any questions, comments? Oh, Trustee Clayton, please.
Is there anything from us advising residents to not to opt out?
Is there something that we would do now to say not to?
Let's say they're not willing to change the rate and they won't cancel the contract. Would it be advisable for the village to advise residents to say, your rate is going way up, this is how it compares to the ComEd rate, and this is how it compares to the ComEd clean energy rate, and we advise you to opt out?
I don't know the answer to that. I think we'd have to talk with our consultant. There seem to be so many moving parts to this that I'm not sure that we can advise our residents and know what the best course of action is. ComEd has sent out a notice saying that, their rates will be changing in June. It's really unclear with the way the markets are right now, what is the best course of action. And for us, the best result is simply if they would honor the contract as it is, but apparently they won't, or they have the right not to.
Trustee Hollander?
If I understand you correctly, we don't need to take any action tonight.
Correct.
Okay. And I propose that we do not take any action tonight.
This is just to let the board know that, we've been given this notice by the electrical supplier.
We didn't know if we would have a proposal from Nordic by this point in time, but we do not. So fallback is obviously ComEd. So the industry is suffering right now. Not suffering, but there's an broad increase throughout the industry. Trustee Jamerson, please.
The only thing to keep in mind is that the ComEd rates change every month. Their major rate increase happens twice a year. But they have a little adjustment charge that they tack onto your bill if you look down towards the bottom that adjusts the price of electricity as it costs them. So, their rates every month change. They go up, they go down, they go up, they go down. Right now, the Nordic contract is more than the ComEd rate for this month. It may not be for next month. So until they come back to, as Bruce and Mayor Ford said, there's no reason to get too excited.
The last time we went through this, we had so many calls at Village Hall with the letters that went out, and it was very confusing. It was very confusing. So, the less we can confuse our residents, possibly better. So, for your information. So, unless there are any other comments on this particular topic, we'll move on. All right, next topic is consideration of an amendment to the special use permit for the Montessori school. If I could please ask Director Wick to begin the discussion.
Thank you again, Mayor. So on August 1st, 2024, the Plan Commission held a public hearing regarding a petition to amend a special use permit previously granted for 3140 Riverwoods Road, which authorized the use of a subject parcel as a private school. The amendment would authorize North Shore Montessori Schools, Inc. to construct a second accessory building, which would be a two-car garage, on the property ancillary to the existing use. At the hearing, several owners of neighboring properties raised concerns that they had over the construction of the garage and several other property maintenance issues. These concerns are documented in the attached approved minutes of the meeting that were attached, I should say, to the staff report. The commission voted 6-0 to conditionally approve such an amendment to the previously issued special use permit. There were conditions that were attached to that approval, which were that the school's administrative personnel would meet with the neighbors no later than August 9th, 2024, and gather a list of issues to be resolved and then present such list to village staff with a plan for resolution of the issues no later than August 13, 2024. The applicant's report and the minutes to the approved minutes for the Plan Commission were attached again to the staff report. And they're in front of you for review and consideration tonight. I'll have to say that out of the issues that we looked at, from the property maintenance issues with regard to water and noise of water on the site, and particularly the exterior lighting, are really the only issues from a property maintenance perspective that we can take a look at with regard to the building code and zoning code. The lighting issues have, to the best of our knowledge, been resolved and are currently code compliant. In the event that any of those light fixtures in the parking lot, which have been shielded, which conform to the zoning ordinance, in the event that those still somehow exude some light that is irritating to passersby or neighbors, we will address that after the garage is actually built. Other than that, the applicant has made a commitment to install landscaping in 3 different areas to block views from 3 different properties, 2 on the east side of the property and 1 toward Vernon Trails. So at this point, we would recommend that the village board not only review the approved minutes from the Plan Commission hearing, the applicant's report, staff report, and make a determination of either approval or denial of the applicant's request, or send the case back to the Plan Commission for further consideration. Anyone have any comments they might have?
This is for board discussion now at this point. Are there any comments, Trustee Hollander?
Yeah, it sounds like that they made a significant attempt to address the issues. The staff feels that the solutions they made are reasonable, and I would recommend that the board approve it.
Is that a motion?
Yes, I thought you were just asking for discussion.
Oh, yes, okay, no, I'm sorry, I don't mean to push forward. Are there any other comments, please?
Should we hear from the residents that are here that are concerned about this, since this is an open
Sure, we
item?
can take this time. Agreeable, agreeable. Yes, are there any residents wishing to speak? Ma'am? Please state your name and address, please.
For years ago, the Montessori school was allowed to build a large structure in a residential neighborhood. They're asking for special requirements to build a new garage. If allowed, our property, will be looking at 3 different building structures. Our home for approximately 7 months a year. To our southwest, is a large red brick school building. All the buildings directly behind it, the lights on, and allow our house to cover northwest side of our property. They are concerned about 5 snow blowers throughout their building. They say it is inconvenient for them. We as neighbors are concerned about buildings days a week. They need a garage for vehicles. Most schools have a garage. They're concerned about vandalism to their building. They can park it closer to the road, so it is visible. There is no. Understand my plans accepted in the garage. You will only see it passing to and from your homes. You will see it constantly throughout the and so Montessori school has planting trees to shield the new garage, and they would have to be 20 feet tall to shield the garage. Added to the special ordinance, it does not provide benefit to Riverwoods. It will take up great space and land. It will factor use. We as good neighbors, we ask the Montessori school not to impact surrounding and business, we ask the village trustees to know on behalf of the neighbors that surround. By voting no to the school,
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to? No. You need to get it a little closer, maybe?
It might not be on.
Did it get turned off? Hey, yeah, hey, Laurie, can you help?
Battery's probably dead.
Well, it's working.
It was working when you.
Yes. Time. Oh, you're going to get clacked. Yeah.
While we're sitting here,
Yes.
if I can just mention one element of procedure. If the board acts tonight, I would suggest the board direct the village attorney to draft an ordinance. The ordinance for special uses normally has a set of conditions if they're appropriate. For discussion of what the applicant is willing to do, is offered to do, I think Director Wood could probably tell us in detail about that. The board may have its own view of what those would be. So it's improper to wait until I've heard what the board wants to do before I try to prepare an ordinance to reflect your desires. So if there's an outcome tonight, I would suggest you direct us to prepare an ordinance if that's what you want us to do.
So,
Trustee Jamerson.
thank you. So Bruce, what I'm hearing you say is that tonight, if the board decides to have this move ahead, then we would direct you to create an ordinance to amend the special use ordinance, right? That we would then talk about at the next meeting possibly and vote on, and there could be conditions set on within that ordinance. Is that not correct?
Yes, typically in our special use ordinances, we try to identify any conditions that are appropriate for the special use, and then we work on drafting those so that the board can look at them when it approves the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Got it? Okay. Thanks, Chief. All right, let's see if we can do this again. Is that right? Okay, very good. My name is Noreen McCartan, and I'm with my husband, Paul Bolton here. We live at 1480 Chippewa Pathway, and I'm here to address the special ordinance, special use. Both Paul and I have worked with children. He's a pediatrician. I'm a retired school teacher, so we love kids. However, we're here today to register our opposition to the amendment to the special use for this North Shore Montessori School. I do want to let the board know that the neighbors really did their due diligence in terms of assessing fairly this project. We met with the Cabbages for probably about 30 minutes to maybe 40. We went at the site. We paced out the garage. We compared the measurements of the height of the garage to the existing buildings. We walked around and tried to get what the view from our property would look like. So we did our due diligence in terms of making this a fair assessment, because we know that Montessori school, it considers itself a good neighbor, and we wanted to be fair. So there are a couple of errors in their presentation, and the first thing I would like you to know is that we are listed as, I think, neighbor number 2, if you're reading the pamphlet. Our house does face the berm, but it faces, we have wall-to-ceiling windows from the north to the south, to the west, I guess it is. So they also indicate that our home is a 1-story. It is a split level. So we have a second story that looks out. So basically our view outside is about 180 degrees. We have a very wide swath of the view.
So I wanted to correct that. And they also said that they didn't believe or think that our house would be able to see the garage. And when I look out at the end of my property a little bit, I can see through the trees. I can see the top of their toddler building or the infant building over my neighbor's fence, which I believe is about 6 feet. So we are already, when the leaves drop, able to see one of their buildings. So that also is, I think, incorrect. They did propose to put 6 to 8 feet evergreens, and basically the neighbor's fence is 6 feet. Again, we can see over the neighbor's fence the Montessori building, so that's really not going to obscure the view. There was also a concern that why not wait until the trees are down, the leaves are down, so we can see what the heck we're looking at. I mean, how complicated is that? This has not been a pressing need for the Montessori school for years. They are indicating that they need a truck housed in a garage, and they are also pushing this to say we have to have it done before the leaves can come down. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous, and in some ways it's a little insulting, and in some ways I feel that it's a little disingenuous. So that is also one of the reasons why we can't have this garage built. So I think that those are my notes that I wanted to, in terms of addressing what they had presented to you. The point from our home is that we don't know what we're going to see, okay? And though there's been pledges to have evergreens, again, we don't know what we're going to see. I don't know how a 6 to 8 foot evergreen is going to obstruct a view that I don't even know what the view looks like. So this is of a concern. And on a personal note, I'd like to end with a couple of things. This has been really stressful, incredibly stressful. I was surprised. It put me on the defense to defend my property. I had to meet with people to discuss something that would impact me and my husband that I had no control over. I don't feel that I should see my corner of River Woods to the aesthetics to someone else, regardless of accommodations, but these people do not have my best interest at heart. The village has to have my best interest at heart. So that has been one thing that has been unwelcomed, that level of stress for my husband and I. The other thing that I would say is that it's also been very heartening because we have reached out to our neighbors for support. And we have received petitions that were drafted by the neighbors. We've received 35 petitions opposing the amendment to the special use ordinance. The Montessori school is a business. You can look at their 990. The salaries are covered from that business. They are allowed to make a profit. So this is not a residential program. This is a business. And I would like to ask any trustee here who would vote to put the garage of the business behind your own home. And also one that you don't even know what it's going to look like. You have no control over that. So those are my points. And I would like to just read you something that one of the neighbors wrote. As much as the Village of Riverwood supports businesses and business growth in our village, the Board of Trustees needs to balance the welfare and community of its residents. In this case, the school is established, and its request for variance now infringes on the welfare of the residents. And so with that, I would just end by asking that you reject this request for an amendment to the North Shore Montessori special use permit, which limits that parcel to 2 school buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Hollander.
Does staff believe that, especially maybe in consultation with Steve Zimmerman, does staff believe that adequate screening is possible to prevent the sight lines that the residents are concerned about?
We have not done an analysis of the site views between the house and the garage.
You know, one of the ways of dealing with this is what our attorney said, and that we could possibly approve this if we made as a part of this process a recommendation that the sight lines are blocked with natural vegetation or other process. Make it contingent upon that, which would resolve, at least from what I understand, much of the concerns.
Anybody else who has comments at this point? Sir?
I'm Paul Bolton, Narian's husband.
I'm sorry, say again.
I'm Paul Bolton, 1480 Chippewa, Narian's husband, the retired pediatrician. I'm used to kids screaming, and the kids that are screaming at the school are having fun, and I actually enjoy hearing that. It really has nothing to do with the kids. It has everything to do with like the lighting at night and things like that. So I hope the school continues to be there and the kids continue to have fun and scream. And that's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. Tom Boyarski, 1380 Indian Trail Road. At first, I just would like to mention that I reached out to all the trustees and the mayor, and I've received a very gracious response from the mayor.
Remember to bring the microphone closer.
I received a very gracious response from the mayor, so I'm very grateful. We've collected signatures of 35 or 6 neighbors, mostly from Indian Trail subdivision, but also I have a signature from one neighbor from Fox Trail. It seems like the property owner is making all kinds of promises and people are getting confused by it. But the main point in this matter, I think, is how do you interpret the current ordinance? I believe, based on my analysis, and I'm not an attorney in the US, but I was trained as a lawyer in Europe, that those kinds of variances or exceptions are only given to property owners in case of rather unusual hardship, but not for just their convenience. And they can in no way harm other neighbors. My experience with zoning changes, variances, and exceptions is limited, but I've done it as a developer in Chicago. And for minor exceptions, you have to find an agreement on consensus with the neighbors. In this situation, there is no such an agreement based on 36 signatures that I have, and I'd like to put them into the record of this meeting with addresses, names, and list of issues that the signers have with this property for years. And this new construction project is going to only aggravate the nuisance and the hardships that property, which was originally created by a huge variance from local residential zoning, to the most of the neighbors, if not all. And there are different ways to look at it, but I want to mention what was said in the petition and signed by 35 or 36 neighbors. There are safety, environmental, and health issues associated with the property. There's a water drainage issue, which is only going to become more pronounced if we put another structure onto the property. There's already a huge parking lot. I think it is big enough to park 30 cars there. So there's a lack of grass and green spaces overall. There's a good sized pond there, which is a mosquito nest. And if we have less grass, obviously we're going to have more water going into that pond. Then there's a pipe under the bike path that drains some of the water from the property into the ditch where it sits again, and it's another mosquito nest. For years, they've been dumping landscaping residue onto the borderline or onto our properties, basically. It's in my backyard. I mean, anybody wants to invite a commercial business to their backyard to keep building and asking for another exception, another amendment every decade or so? I don't. And my 35 or 6 neighbors don't either. As far as the process thus far, it's been rather controversial, I would say the least, because in the Planning Commission, we voiced those concerns. I don't believe the village staff has the resources to administer all the rules that are already in place. And look at the example of the litigation that occurred when the school wanted to increase the attendance. It was litigated and was settled, but at what expense? Whose expense? Taxpayers? The village? So, I mean, they don't bother me, but they've been given exceptions to build as it is today. And I'm simply saying enough is enough. The property is already overbuilt. There's lack of green spaces, trees. There was some cut, I don't know if with permit or without, but a big tree was cut within the last couple of months. And it all has been negatively affecting the neighbors for decades. And nothing has been done about it. So I don't believe in rapid change in management practices, in property maintenance. Why? Because I've lived there since 2001, and I see that nothing has changed for the better. So how is it going to help us if there's another big construction project? Again, like green spaces, more water runoff, and so on and so forth. There's also all kinds of buildings that are very inconsistent style, and from building to building, it all looks like it's patched. So they will build another structure that's, probably doesn't fit by design inside another eyesore, probably in a residential zoning area where the village has allowed since I think it all began, according to my neighbors who lived there in the 80s. The first building was built there before they moved in the 80s. I moved in 2001. So there's also no need for a garage at the school. I mean, the school needs teachers and students and good learning environment, not a garage. There are traffic issues already, even for the people at Indian Trail subdivision, because obviously kids have to be brought to school. No bus comes and brings a bunch of them, but cars coming back and forth. Now we're going to add construction trucks, right? The elevation of that area is very strange. They have a hill that sloped more towards our backyards where the water kind of occurs. Why was it allowed that way? I have no idea, but nobody else was able to do it this way when they built anything in the village. They didn't dispose the soil from the excavation, apparently. There's an issue, of course, with the exterior lights. There's an issue with the view. And there were no studies done by anyone in the village beyond how this growing property is going to affect environment and the quality of life of the neighbors. So I would like to know what the process is for us to include the petitions.
If you can present that to the village clerk.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention, and let me know if you have any questions, because I've lived there as a neighbor since 2001. I haven't complained, but at this point I have to say something, because it's in the, like my neighbor said, it's rather unfriendly how they are approaching this as far as the property owners, and also they are promising so much, but there's just no concrete plan. Even the planning commission wasn't giving any drawings that would exactly describe how this new structure is going to look like. That's why we opposed it. And I asked them personally, as did my neighbors, we asked them, please do not move forward till you get more information. But they did anyway. So
Well, thank you
for
very
your
much.
attention. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. Okay,
Good start.
great way to start. David Ritter, Fort Vernon Trail. Next month, I will have lived on Fort Vernon Trail for 35 years. We built our house and moved in 1989. I have a bit of history on the block. I have a bit of history with the school. Mayor Ford and Attorney Huvard well remember the issues we had with the school many, many years ago. I'm not sure if anyone else here knows about that. We went through an issue with the special use way back 30 plus years ago when they expanded. But I was living there before that. They have been good neighbors. They have been cooperative neighbors. They have been collaborative neighbors. Doug and Tony sitting behind me, who run the school now after their parents retired, have been great. We have had many, many meetings, either in their parking lot, which by the way hasn't changed in size in 35 years, either in the parking lot or on the street, to talk about a myriad of issues, to doing a new street, seal coating, swapping ideas, planting trees, water running through the subdivision, anything you could think that neighbors would collaborate on, we have collaborated on. We haven't always agreed 100%, but we've discussed. And we've reached accommodations that everyone is happy. And we've reached an accommodation on the street with the garage. I am the president of the Homeowners Association of Vernon Trail, and probably have been so for the vast majority of the 35 years I've lived there. No one else wants it. And I got voted when I missed a meeting once, and here I sit. Everyone on the street has asked me to come tonight as a representative of our street in support of this project. It isn't a big project. It doesn't change the footprint. The big hill that's there has always been there for as long as I've lived there. And one other anecdote, I have a picture book of the development that starts, because that was before the days of even a camcorder, so we took still photos. It starts as a forest, then a dirt road, and then the houses moved in, and we built our house and moved in. And our lovely neighbors have been there as well. I talked with Tony and Doug about this project quite a while ago. I do see the need for it. And I also see that they're being accommodating to our needs. There's one neighbor that will see the building. I walked over to the school with Tony and Doug. I saw exactly where they were going to put it. Then I went to my neighbor's house. I walked into his dining room. I walked up into their bedrooms. I looked at the site plans. I went back to Tony and Doug. I said, what are you going to do about it? They said, well, after it's built, we will plant trees wherever the neighbor wants them to deal with the site plans. They don't want the neighbor to be unhappy. And I said, what are you doing about Indian Trail? He said, we'll do the same thing. I don't know how big the trees will be when they start. Trees grow. The trees they've planted before have grown. They're big. My trees have grown. They're big. I trust them. They will do what they say. Another significant issue I have is one of safety. There is vandalism on our block. We know we're not supposed to park our cars outdoors. We know we're not supposed to leave them open, leave anything in them. We read the police blotters. We see what happens. Cars get broken into. Maybe not on our street, maybe not one street over, but we read, we see what happens. Our mailboxes have been knocked down. So they're white Chevy Tahoe. Suburban. It's there. We see it up and down every time we go on the street. Okay? I worry about it. It's white. It's a big white car. It's going to get stolen. It's going to get vandalized. And when those criminals are in our neighborhood, what else are they going to do? What other window are they going to shoot at? What other car are they going to steal? What else are they going to do? If the car, like every other car on our block, is in a building that you cannot see, it is no longer an attractive nuisance. That concerns me. It also concerns me that they have to leave some construction material or salt or what have you outdoors. They're trying to run their business. I am a lawyer, and my job is to try and solve problems. And what you do is you try and reach accommodations, in my opinion, for whatever issues people have. That's what they're trying to do. They have a business reason, a legitimate business reason, in my opinion, and the opinions of the people on our block to have this garage so the truck is not visible and other building materials are not visible. So they're not attractive nuisances. Yes, there may be some sightline issues. Bruce, you can do your ordinance and they will agree to put the trees up where they say they will. I believe these issues can be accommodated. I feel for the people on Indian Trail, but when we moved in, there was one small schoolhouse. Actually, it was two small buildings. And then they redeveloped, we redid the special use, and they put up a significantly larger building. All right, life changes. We've lived with that building for 30 plus years. It's been fine. By the way, there is no traffic problem. I don't know how people on Indian Trail would know that there's a traffic problem on Vernon Trail, but there is no traffic problem. There's not a lot of cars coming in. There's not a lot of cars coming out. There's peak times, but in the 30 plus years, I have not seen it. There is no water problem on Vernon Trail with all of this. We worked on it together as a community, and the water flows just fine. We take turns, we clear out the debris from the manhole covers to make sure the water flows. So I don't know what, as far as I see, it's just a site issue that can be dealt with. I'm sorry to go on and on, but I cannot emphasize enough how much in support we are of this project for our neighbors. We believe that they do need it. We believe it's legitimate. We think it's legitimate to support a business in our community that teaches children, and that if they need this truck, and it should be sheltered so it doesn't deteriorate and doesn't become an attractive nuisance. Thank you.
Excuse me 1 minute. You mentioned vandalism on your street. That concerns me. And that's why I was looking at Chief. If you experienced that, that's what I.
Well, we had a BB gun shoot out our windows. We had police over. It was 2 years ago now, 3 years ago.
Okay, I just, again, as a community piece, when you talk about vandalism on your street, that raised my,
Sure. Sure. I mean, you had, one of the detectives came over and it was handled properly, quickly and efficiently. And we appreciated him, for doing that. But,
for a safety reason, I mean, okay, thank you. We'll,
but just the mayor, their mailbox got knocked over again within the last couple of months as well.
yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, but there's a lot of stuff happening everywhere. I mean, it's not just kind of like, I mean, to a certain degree. Mailboxes. Our neighbor Paul and Maureen Bolton had their mailbox knocked over too. Oops, sorry.
Our neighbor Paul and Noreen Bolton had their mailbox knocked over too. Some of that stuff just happens. I don't know that a suburban sitting in a parking lot is the cause of that.
Well, I'm certainly not saying it's a cause because I don't know what the cause is. It's people being vandals. But I do read in various blotters where cars that are left out at night are stolen or vandalized. And that concerns me. And what concerns me is if that happens on the way out, what else do they do?
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Excuse me, come forward, so we can get that on the record, please.
Again, in terms of the vandalism, I do think that's a bit of fear mongering. We had I leave my car out in the driveway and it has been egged and our mailbox was knocked down. However, we had the police over and both of the officers told us that it was kids, that they saw this all the time in Glenview or wherever they used to work, and that these were kids and that this was unfortunately part of their prank. So I just want that to be registered.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments from the trustees? Any discussion from the trustees? Are you getting ready?
I don't know, I guess.
Trustee Jamerson, please.
I get the point about the sight lines, and I also wonder, what the rush is to put this garage up. We're probably a month and a half from all the leaves falling off the trees, so we could know for sure what the sight lines look like. I'm also wondering about the location on the property. It looks like, from what I've seen, that the garage is kind of on the end of the parking lot, which runs like kind of maybe north and south, but it's at the end of the parking lot. But it looks like from the maps that there's also a piece of property that's closer to Vernon Trail that's vacant right now, which might be farther away from the neighbors on Chippewa. I'm wondering if there was a reason why the garage wasn't slated to be put over there. And maybe that's the wrong thing for me to ask, but
It's perfectly reasonable. Talking about.
Does someone from the school have a reason for that? Or actually, the two questions, I mean, is the bigger question, I think, is maybe not where the garage is, although I think maybe it would alleviate some of the neighbors on Chippewa if it was on the, whatever way this way is, towards Vernon Trail. I know you're not looking at my map, but I don't know, I can't tell what direction that is. But I guess the bigger question is, why can't you wait a month and a half until all the leaves fall off, and then you can definitely see where the sight lines are?
Hi, my name's Tony Campick, and to answer your first question on the location, the part that's closer to Vernon Trail is the 12-foot tall mound. That's the mound that goes up.
Oh, that's a mound?
Yes.
It's hard to tell from here.
Yeah,
It looks like it's a perfectly flat piece of ground.
There are some photos attached if you want to look in the packet. I believe it's photo 1 and photo 2 kind of show you to the left, which would be that north area. That's where the mound goes up and the back half of it is covered with trees.
I'm looking at map number 3, if you look on that and you see where it says evergreen trees plant as needed, and there's one that's right underneath where it says 12 feet. There's one towards neighbor number one, and then there's one that's towards Vernon Trail.
Sure.
Is that where the mound is?
Yeah, that's the mound. It stretches from Vernon Trail to the east property line.
To where those trees are?
Yeah, it does. And it basically, the garage is just beyond the foot of the base of the hill.
Okay.
And then the hill goes up and crests and goes towards the swimming pool you see on the north, on the neighbor's property.
Okay. All right. So that answers the question of why the garage isn't there. Okay.
And elsewhere on the property, you run into setbacks and easements, conservation areas, and you have a number of areas. And in terms of timing, our pledge is the same, and we have no problem with it being a condition within the ordinance that we plant to block whatever sight lines people will have. So either way, our pledge is the same.
Okay. May I ask Attorney Hubbard? So if we put together an ordinance that says that they have to plant whatever screening is necessary, and they build a garage, and they don't, I'm not saying you would do this, but if they didn't plant the trees that would screen adequately for the neighbors, what is our recourse as a village? Do we have to tear the garage down?
Well, that would be one. Yes.
I don't know what our recourse is. I'm curious.
I mean, if the condition for the special use is violated, that particular condition, then in our ordinances, we usually say that after notice and opportunity to be heard, the board can rescind the special use for that part of it that allow that permission. And if you rescind the special use, then that's not a permitted structure anymore.
Okay.
Trustee Dickon, please.
Yes, I have a question regarding existing vegetation on the property. It looks very dense, which makes me think that this might be buckthorn. I understand we hadn't had the village ecologist inspect the property, but could there be a case where there are woodlands on the property and you may not be allowed to plant anything you want in terms of, like, you may not be allowed to plant dense arborvitae within a woodlands area?
The areas that we're talking about on that map 3 are areas that have no vegetation existing right now between the proposed garage and neighbor 1, and between the proposed garage and Vernon Trail. On the actual hill, I mean, again, we seriously doubt there will be a need for anything because there are 10-foot trees on top of a hill that crests at 12 feet high. If there are, again, we'll work with the village and the village forester to do what's ever necessary there.
So to answer my question, is that buckthorn that you currently have growing out there? The dense bushes, the dense shrubs?
It's probably a mixture of things. On top of that mound is a mixture. There's definitely buckthorn up there. We've worked with the village in the past to remove buckthorn and do different plantings throughout the property. But that would be that third area up on the hill. The other 2 areas have no vegetation right there. Yeah, that's a berm.
So if I may, sorry, Chris.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Smith.
Just to be clear, I'm the property owner to the east. I just want to make sure that's perfectly clear to everybody. I don't want that to be a question. But as I look at this, obviously, you probably know what I think. But as I think about the special use ordinance, there are 3 components that a special use ordinance is supposed to meet to be approved. It is beneficial for public convenience at that location. A garage is not public convenience at that location. It is so designed, located, and proposed to be operated that the public health, safety, morals, and welfare and interests will be protected. I would say from a public health perspective, it does not protect the people on Chippewa Pathway because we will be looking at yet another school building of a third design, probably of third colors. It's a mishmash of stuff. That's a technical term, in case anybody's wondering. And then the last thing that the special use ordinance has to meet is will not cause substantial injury to the value of other property in the neighborhood in which it is located. Now, is it going to create a substantial monetary impact? I would guess probably not. Right now, on Chippewa Pathway, we do not see the car that they want to build a garage to put in. We would see the garage all the time, with or without screening. And what we saw you put up on to Vernon Trail, 3, 4, 5 foot pines, it'll take 30 years for those to be big enough that we won't see the garage. So I think from a special use ordinance perspective, they are not meeting the cause or the purpose of the special use ordinance. And I believe that this should be declined. It is solely for their convenience. Maybe impacts vandalism on Vernon Trail, but I think that's doubtful.
Any other trustee wishing to make a comment? Trustee Eastman.
I hesitate to raise this, but I don't know what our procedure is with these sorts of things, given that Trustee Smith appears to be in a house that's, directly involved with this. What is our rule? And this is more going forward for cases of this type with recusing yourself if there's some particular impact on your property. Nothing against what you're saying, and I would do the same thing, but what is the rule?
Process. You want the proper
process? Yeah.
So most of the direct prohibitions on conflicts of interest have to do with having a financial interest, like benefiting financially from a contract that's going to be approved. Those are clear conflicts of interest. This state statute said you can't vote on something like that. The standard for trustees generally is not really written into the state law. It's a common law standard of a sort of a fiduciary obligation that says you shouldn't vote on a matter if you don't feel that you could be disinterested enough to vote as a disinterested legislator. In other words, that you could take into account the best interests of the village. Now, the determination of whether that's so is up to each individual trustee. Again, there's no procedure to say, no, we don't think you're capable of that. And if you think about the number of trustees in the village who've been in special service areas and voted for their formation, or many ordinances affect individual trustees as residents of the village. How can they not? They're residents. So when they vote on a hazardous tree ordinance, the ordinance will affect them. So this is an ordinance of considering amending a special use. There are standards in the code, and when different trustees voice opinions about whether those standards have been met, they're all expressing their opinion about what's in the best interest of the village. So I can't sit here and say that a trustee who lives next to a property can't exercise judgment as to what's in the best interest of the village. All of you who don't live next to the property are probably thinking you can't express what's in the best interest of the village, but you're not next door to the property. So, it cuts both ways. So, I think that I did have a discussion with Trustee Smith, and I basically said the same thing to him, that the best practice and the standard is that you shouldn't vote on something if you can't give the applicant the benefit of your considered judgment, as a representative of the entire village. Of course, there are many cases that are a bit, difficult to untangle, but
No, that's good enough for me. I was just curious because I was thinking if, something were to come up similar to that, I just wondered what the actual standard was. So I have no concern.
And thank you, Attorney Hubbard. And Andy, as Bruce said, he and I did discuss it because I would have recused myself if I should have. But I think the other thing that's important to note is that there are 37 other petitions. It's just not Colleen and me and Bruce and Paul that are opposed to this. There's 37 other petitions that were signed that are opposed to this. So I do believe that it's in the best interest of the village.
Fair enough, but I would argue that some of those are obviously quite far away that they wouldn't be directly impacted, right? I mean, it'd be like if I said, I live on Cherry, right, and had an opinion. Some may be very close, but I mean, a general petition doesn't get that much weight. But
they're mostly from our neighborhood.
Okay.
At Vernon Trails.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody signed them from Vernon Trail, but.
Okay.
Sir, would you like to?
Yes, I just wanted to add a couple of comments.
And your name is?
I'm sorry, my name is Doug Gambick.
Thank you.
On behalf of the school. Couple of questions, I think, from aesthetics. We've worked very hard for 38 years to have a wonderful school as part of the community. And I think as many of our neighbors will have said from Vernon Trails, it's really a beautiful property. If you haven't seen it, we would welcome you to come and see our school, walk the property. And we work very hard to make sure that we're an asset to the community and provide something very important to the community. As far as what the building would look like, we did bring a picture for the Plan Commission so they would see that this would look very similar to the existing structures that are on the building. The one building, the square building that's directly next door to where the garage would be, this would be pretty much the same color trim. The roofing material would be the same that would match the other larger building. So there's a cohesiveness to our property. We want it to look nice. I think that's very important to us, and we want it to look nice for our neighbors. I do also want to say we're talking about building a garage. We're not trying to build the Empire State Building. We're not trying to build a nightclub or a casino. I think we're just trying to build something simple that solves a problem and meets our needs for, number one, a school vehicle that we feel strongly. It is very helpful to have that stored inside where it is safe and secure. We have had issues of intruders on our property in the last 45 days. 2 incidents have happened. We've had vandalism on our property. So there's a question about safety for us. And I think when we talk about the special use amendment that I think you had brought up, we talk about public safety. And I think as one of our neighbors had brought up, when people come onto a property, that's maybe step one. We don't know what they're going to do step 2. So creating things that are out in the open that invite people to maybe come onto your property and do things can affect our neighbors as well. So we think this is a benefit to all parties, not just for our convenience, but we also think from the property point of view, it also allows us to store some things. For example, some beautiful wooden benches that we have by our little garden area where we have a fountain where parents and children can sit together, have some quiet time together. But those wooden benches, when they sit outside all the time in the winter, because we have nowhere to store them, decay and need to be replaced. And that costs money. And we are a not-for-profit school. And I know that does, someone said, entitles you to make a profit. We're not in this business to become wealthy and make a bunch of money. We're here to provide education. I think that's our goal, number one. So spending money on things that we could potentially save that money and use that for other things involved with our schools that benefits the families, benefits the children. We think that's important. So this is a big investment for us. And it takes us many years to save money to do this, especially going through a pandemic that extremely stressed the schools. So we feel it's important. We're trying to be very sensitive to our neighbors. We did, as required by Village, reach out before the Plan Commission meeting and sent somewhere close to 40 letters or 35 to 40 letters out to people that live around the school and invited them to know there's a Plan Commission meeting. This is going to be the topic. And I think we did have a few neighbors that are here come and speak and address their concerns. After the Plan Commission meeting, we were asked, meet with your neighbors, work together with your neighbors. And in good faith, we did that. Within 24 hours of that meeting, we personally hand-delivered letters to every neighbor on Chippewa and I don't know where the Indian Trail that directly abut our property that may have an opportunity to see this building. Again, it's a garage. It's not some monstrous, awful looking thing. We want it to look nice, just as everyone in Riverwoods knows with the leaves drop, you see your neighbor's home. Is that a terrible thing? I don't really think it is. So we're trying to be sensitive that we did meet with our neighbors. We did talk about what we would do. We made our commitment to what we would do, and we stand behind those. We've been here for 38 years, and I don't think we've done that by being shysters. I think we've done that by having integrity, ethics, and a commitment.
Trustee Hollander, please.
A couple of comments. One is one of the reasons we have plan commissions and zoning board is to preview these things and take a look at them in a much more detail than maybe that we do as board of trustees. And we have a 6-0 approval from the plan commission, and I'm always hesitant to question the plan commission's efforts. I think we have to have a pretty good reason if we get something like that up at the board. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen, but I think we have to think twice about it when we get that type of approval. Second of all, I think most of the neighbors who purchased property adjacent to this did so after this was built. In other words, they moved into the neighborhood while the school's already there. That may not be true for all, but they knew that the school was there when they purchased their property, and the buildings were there, and the traffic was there. Third, it seems to me that the major objection is the sightline. And I think that if we can accommodate to prevent the sightlines so the neighbors don't see it, and the staff and Steve Zimmerman can find a way to do that, I think we've made a reasonable effort to resolve it. And the last point I would like to make is, yeah, we're a community of residents, private residents, but we're also a community of businesses and commercial interests. And I think as a board, we have to recognize that they have a position and the responsibility to support them as well as our private residents. The school has been around for almost 40 years. I think that unless they have some structure which is non-conforming, they're in compliance. And I don't think that we should treat them any less than we would any private resident. We have a responsibility towards our businesses as well as we do our private residents. So I would like to make a motion that we approve it with the contingency that the sightlines are blocked from the residents after a staff review and the consultation with Steve Zimmerman.
Just a point of order.
Yes.
Yes.
I thought we were just going to authorize the village attorney to prepare an ordinance at this point.
Let me rephrase it. I'd like to prepare an ordinance that puts that into place.
Your motion is to direct the attorney to prepare an ordinance approving the special use with that condition.
Yes.
Embodied in the ordinance.
Were there other conditions that the plan commission identified in the memo here that should also be considered?
Mayor Ford?
Yes. Trustee Smith.
So a point of clarification, Steve Witt. In the plan commission notes, it says that the roof of the building cannot, it says Director Witt noted this, and I'm on page 3 of the plan commission notes. Director Witt noted the zoning code requires accessory structures not to exceed 15 feet in height. The
Before you go,
plan, excuse me, that the Riverwoods Montessori School has submitted seems to be 17 and a half feet in height. Which is it?
that is an error on my part. I misspoke at the hearing. The height limitation, as indicated in the staff report, is 18 feet. So the height of the building, which is shown in the packet that the school put together, was 17'6". So they meet the criteria of the 18-foot limit.
Thank you
My
for the
apologies for
clarification.
that misnomer.
Is it possible, may I ask a question? Rather than a peaked roof, you have a building there that has a flat roof. Would it be possible to have this built as a flat roof building?
I mean, it is possible to do, but it would not be a desirable look. The flat roof building that is adjacent is definitely architecturally not as pleasing, I would say, as the peak roof building.
And I think I would just also add too, when it comes to flat roofs and maintenance, leaks, problems, that's one thing we found with that building, and we've just recently had to replace that roof also. I think for probably the second time in a handful of probably 20 years. So flat roofs we tend to have more issues with versus a peak roof.
Director Witt.
Mayor, I'm not trying to be the architect on this project, but the drawings as the applicant has presented has the peak of the roof essentially parallel to the east property line of the school. This garage being relatively square in fashion, I believe it's listed as 24 by 24, that peak could actually be rotated 90 degrees. So the height, the volume of this elevation that you see, instead of being a long roof at 17.6, only becomes a peak at 17.6 and totally diminishes the look, the volume that the neighbors would see. I would suggest that as an enhancement and a change to this if the board were so willing to do so, because it will dramatically reduce the look of the volume of that building from the neighbor's perspective.
At that point, I would also be concerned about where lighting would be positioned on that building.
They could, without too much effort, build a small projected, I wouldn't call it a roof line, but it essentially would be a roof line over the door and maintain soffit lights so that they are recessed and you don't have coach lights anyhow. Keeping in mind, though, that even if coach lights were provided on the west side of the building, if the applicant provided the frosted chimneys on the coach lights, no different than they have done since the time of the Plan Commission meeting, and went through the entire campus and changed out all except the tall parking lot lights that are exposed to neighbors by installing the frosted chimney lights. A, that meets the intent of the lighting ordinance. B, it would be on the west side of the building. It would never be seen by the residents on the east side of the property.
Trustee
So they have two options to handle the lighting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Trustee Clayton, were you?
Well, there was a motion and I want to second the motion. At this point, I also put great weight on the findings of the Plan Commission and I think that we should only overturn the findings of the Plan Commission if we have a strong reason to do so. And at this point, I would like to also see what the ordinance looks like and then make a final decision once we see the ordinance.
Is the suggestion that Director Witt made acceptable to you in terms of rotating the peak?
So changing from what I think would be a reverse gable to a gable, rotate this 90.
You would in essence just rotate the roof 90 degrees.
Right.
So instead of the water flowing to the east and to the west to your gutters, it'll now flow essentially north and south. It's the same thing, it's the same area. There will be no increase in cost to you because, again, this is a square building, but you would dramatically reduce the look of the volume of that building if you would be so kind as to make that change.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have a specific objection to that. Ironically, we positioned it this way because we actually thought this would be preferable because the shingles would effectively blend in with the parking lot surface. And if there was anyone viewing it from the east at any time, we thought it would blend more than putting the, gray to match the building up higher. That was our initial thought, but we don't have an objection to doing it either way.
And I'm not saying it wasn't with the best of intentions, but we don't see the parking lot from Chippewa Pathway. So it's all just more black or whatever color the shingles are. Gray, excuse me.
Motion and a second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second.
Before we do that, Mayor,
Yes,
may I add one more thing? So one of the problems with the Plan Commission meeting that I attended, I did not speak, but I attended with my wife and some of the neighbors, was that The neighbors were able to raise concerns, and Director Steve Witt was there, Lori was there, Sherry, she left, but she was there. The problem was, or one of the problems was that, they kind of pitched their proposal. I don't mean any disrespect to those words, just they pitched their proposal. The neighbors were able to get up and speak about their concerns. And then, as I recall it, and Lori, I may be wrong, the Plan Commission essentially allowed Riverwoods Montessori School to come back and address the resident concerns, but then at that point closed the open discussion so that so essentially Riverwoods Montessori School could rebut residents, but residents couldn't rebut Riverwoods Montessori School. I know. So anyways, what I would actually propose, instead of sending it to the attorney to have him draft an amendment, or an amendment to the special use ordinance, is I would like to see it go back to the Plan Commission, have a thorough hearing. Now that we've got a lot of residents on board, 37 petitions signed, there were only 3 or 4 at that initial Plan Commission meeting. I think the outcomes could be different, and I'd like for us to consider maybe going that approach versus having Attorney Hubbard burn time and burn money on an amendment that may or may not meet the needs.
I think there's a motion on the floor with a second.
That's
true. Call the question unless there's more discussion.
I take your comments, Jeff, as you're expressing your opposition to the motion, but at this point, there's still a motion on the floor to be voted.
Yep. Okay. I think this calls a roll call. All right, roll call, please.
Trustee Smith.
Nay.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Dickon.
Aye. Aye.
Trustee Eastman.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander. Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, so the direction then is for our attorney to draft an ordinance with considerations for some architectural change. I believe there was, lighting was mentioned.
Sideline screening.
And screening.
Mayor?
Yes, Trustee Hollander.
Yeah, just for the audience and for others, this did not approve the change. I would encourage those of you who have an objection to this or other concerns that when the attorney brings back the ordinance, that you still have an opportunity to express your views. And if something new has come up or the ordinance doesn't appear to be as acceptable as to what we think it might be, this has not been approved yet. So I just want the audience to know that there's a final step yet.
Thank you, Trustee Hollander, for stating that.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on, we have an item of old business, approval of an ordinance amending and restating certain.
We just have 2 minutes of time. It's just when you moved out, like residents had to ask a question. It was moved out on the agenda, so I came just before 8 thinking that.
If you're talking about the petition for burning, we talked about a little bit about that, and the board will take it up. Okay, 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay? So Meg, Tom and Meg, well, first of all, my name is Laura Millman. I live at 2680 Gemini Lane.
Wait.
No, you've got to speak it.
You gotta get closer to the
I was trying to do 2 minutes, okay? Okay, Laura Millman at 2680 Gemini Lane. And I'm here on behalf of this petition to change the ordinance about burning. And you all received it, so I don't need to read through it. Meg and Tom Rodolewski, who live directly behind us, put this together. And the reason that this petition was developed is because one of our direct neighbors is chopping wood, piling it up and burning it every day. You hear the saw, you hear the leaf blower. This is unbelievable, like every day. So she had tried to call the police in the past, like last year, but there's an ordinance that says you can do this. So so you're the noise, constantly burning every day. And I was like, gosh, is it true? So every day I've been going out and smelling the smoke. So that's why you've got this, because it's a big nuisance and the fire is left unattended. Like she showed me a picture today that she took with it still, the embers glowing on the ground and nobody around. And the property is at 565 Sherry. The neighbor is new. It's somebody who built the house maybe 2 years ago, or maybe it hasn't even been 2 years. So there's something very strange going on. And so with that, that's why this position was developed. Okay.
Thank you very much. You should know that we did talk about it a little bit, and we are going to be considering it, so.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, ordinance amending and restating certain provisions of the Riverwoods Insurance and Indemnity Ordinance. This would be the second reading and approval. Do I have a motion for second reading and approval?
So moved.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
I just
Trustee
had,
Jamerson, yes, please.
I just had one question, and I'm sorry because I if you can bear with me just for a second, because I had it up and I was looking for a map for the other thing, and so now I lost the. Here it is.
It's page 132.
Well, I was looking for the blue line.
That was sent out separately.
Right. That's
Yeah.
so. Under the commercial general liability, under 811.4A, the last paragraph says the products and completed operations aggregate shall be maintained for 5 years after the final payment. Tell me what that means, because does that mean that the insurance certificate, the insurance has to be maintained for 5 years, or is that because that's unreasonable if that's the insurance? If it's something else, and if it's just about the aggregate of the aggregate per location basis, then it's probably not onerous. But as a contractor, if you asked me to maintain an insurance certificate for a project I did for 5 years, I would not be happy, and I probably would strike that. If that's what it means. I'm not sure what it means because I don't recognize that language.
Well, it would be on page 132 of the pack.
It's 11, it's under A, it's the last sentence under commercial general liability.
Had a lengthy discussion with our insurance consultant about this. On major construction projects, it's typical to require it now for 10 years, believe it or not. And the village can waive these requirements and probably would most of the time. Would we waive it for, say, building the village hall? No, probably not. I could go back and look and see what we did. Basically the gamble you take is that the contractor doesn't stay in business. But if the contractor stays in business, they're required to continue because it's an occurrence-based policy. So if something happens 2 years or 3 years after the project is completed, if the policy at that time doesn't list you, there's no insurance to cover you.
No, I understand that, but I will tell you that as a contractor who does tens of millions of dollars worth of projects for one customer, we've never had to do that.
Well,
and I would push back on it every single time.
We haven't actually had many instances where we have required it that I can think of.
Okay, well, and if it's something we can waive in the future, I'm okay with that, but
I do understand because I have these discussions with contractors also, but I will go back and ask our insurance consultant if there is some other way to express it. I mean, I at one point had 1 year or 2 years, and she corrected me and said that's very light. But
well, and once again, if it's maintaining the insurance, it's different than if it's only involving the aggregate which I'm not, like I said, I'm not familiar with that particular term, and I read these all the time.
Let me come back to you. This can wait. There's no,
Okay.
this is, if you don't mind.
No, that's fine. The other question under workman's comp, and believe me, I understand how important workman's comp is, is that if it's a single, my understanding is, and I could be wrong, but if it's a single owner and they're the only employee, typically they don't carry workman's compensation insurance. And I don't know that that's the way this reads. It says there's no exclusions. So if you could ask them about that as well, under workman's comp, under B.
Yeah, I don't think it means a sole proprietor, but I
Okay.
will check on that as well.
If you could check.
I will check.
And
this
then
out.
just as a point of caution for the village, we should always make sure that if we're hiring a contractor, that the people that are working for them are their employees and not 1099, because that's a good way to get sued.
Simply just had that issue. So
Okay.
we are aware of it. Thank you, Rick.
Okay.
Okay, I will get back to you with a better explanation for both of those.
So we need to withdraw the motion.
Well, if someone would withdraw the motion in a second, we'll
Who made the motion?
No, then I withdraw my motion. I did that so we could talk about it, because we're not supposed to talk about it until there's a motion in a second.
I'll get, it's a very technical area, as you know, and I will get back with better answers for you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We'll put that over. No reason to go into executive session. You see a list of the next dates and times for our meetings, just highlighting the workshop and the change on the 15th, and highlighting the change of our regular meeting to November 6th, not November 5th. But
I have one quick thing to add. I'm sorry. I know it's
God's
late.
sakes, you know there's a lunar eclipse, right?
Oh,
There's from
maybe we'll get out
9:40 to
in time for the
9:50. That's
clouds.
just the little edge.
I just want to say that this doesn't happen very often in Riverwood, so I want to.
Oh, sure.
As the liaison to the Chamber of Commerce of Deerfield, Bannockburn, and Riverwoods, there will be a ribbon cutting in Riverwoods for the Tap House Grill.
Oh.
And you're going to ask, where is the Tap House Grill?
Already
It's at
been
the
there.
Deerfield. It's at the Deerfield Park
Country
District.
Club.
Golf course.
Golf course.
It's going to be on October 9th at 3 p.m. And I will be attending because I'm the liaison, but anyone else that would like to come, including you, Mayor, would be great.
I've already eaten there. I didn't realize, I thought they cut a ribbon.
Well.
Been there. In fact,
Okay.
they had a nice event. Pets and Paws was there on Saturday.
anyways,
Okay,
that's all I
motion
have.
to adjourn, please.
Motion.
Second. Is there a second? I can't second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, goodbye.
Who seconded that motion? Somebody raise their hand. There you go.
Okay.